The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Thank you, Tally Olson. I am back, and you are comfortably zoned with me, the Zig Zag Man, in Alameda, California, right across the bay from San Francisco, and across the bridge from Oakland, California. Now, this is going to run together because my guest is the son of a man who played at the most illustrious high school in Oakland. He went on to be a major league center fielder with the Cincinnati Reds for years, an all-star, a borderline Hall of Famer, and his son is also named Vada Pinson. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on tonight.
Oh, good. I've been looking forward to talking to you for a long time because, as you know, your dad played at McClymonds High School in Oakland. And for those of you who don't know, McClymonds High School had, in addition to Bill Russell as an alum and Paul Silas and a few other basketball greats, they had an outfield at one time of your dad, Vada Pinson, Curt Flood, and Frank Robinson, all playing in the same outfield at McClymonds. Is that something else or what?
That's a great outfield. That's a Hall of Fame outfield, if you ask me.
Yes, absolutely. All three of them. That we could tell stories about Curt Flood and how he ended up changing the game of baseball and profited not. But that's another story. So that's my hook to Vada Pinson. I'll mention another ball player, a guy I grew up watching, played with both the Yankees and the Mets, and that was Jesse Gonder. Came from that same high school. Just for your edification out there. So Vada, what's your first memory of being Vada's son?
I guess when I realized about baseball, as you're growing up, I guess it was baseball-wise, of course.
It
was when he was with the Indians, because that's when I think was my first trip to the, that I recognized that I was actually in a locker room with, like Sam McDowell and, and a lot of the players like Chuck Hinton, the guys that I can remember. But then again, as a child, I remember Leo Cardenas, I remember Frank Robinson, and even, I even remember Pete Rose as a child.
Wow.
As a child, you don't really realize, the game of baseball until you actually start playing it. But I remember it was a lot of fun times being able to go to the locker room and meeting all these guys now that are actually in the Hall of Fame.
My curiosity is, which of their children did you meet as a kid?
Well, I think that one is like Frank Robinson. We used to hang out with their kids a lot when we were small, when we were younger, and then even Leo Cardenas. I just saw Leo back in 2019. They did the Cincinnati Reds did a bobblehead of my father, and I hadn't seen Leo in over 20 years until 2019. So it was a joy to be able to get back and see him. Because last time I saw him, we were just kids, and it was fun. I miss those guys.
Oh, wow. I just had another thought that I wanted to get in here about your dad. I was the Topps rep on the West Coast in the 80s and 90s. I would sign players on behalf of Topps, contract them to be on baseball cards in when and if they made the major leagues. And I traveled to the Northwest League in the early 90s, and your dad was a rover with Seattle, if I'm not mistaken, and just happened to be in town the day he was in town, and we hung with a bunch of the players who didn't, this is back in the 90s, and they didn't realize who they were being coached by. And I remember telling a group of people in front of your dad, I can't say I made him blush, no, but he appreciated the look in his eye was great. When I told the players there were two players in the major leagues when Vada Pinson played that were reputed to be the fastest runners of anybody. One was a guy a pitcher named Pedro Ramos. And I told them the other one was Vada Pinson. There was no one faster than Vada Pinson. Some as fast, Willie Davis, but no one faster. So I enjoyed enlightening a bunch of kids as to who they were associating with. And that's another one of my Veda stories.
Yeah, I recently just got a tape. I have a gentleman on Facebook who actually sent me a tape where my dad lays down a bunt, and you see him actually, and to be able to see him run down the first baseline, you know, and see how fast he really was. You know, a lot of people don't realize how fast my father was when he played, and he got down line and he beat it out, and it was amazing. You know, because that's the first time I actually got to see him play in his prime. So it was actually exciting to see that.
Good that you get to see just how great they were. I'm old enough. I grew up in New York. I remember the Yankees playing the Reds in the '61 World Series. And just the memory of that. And there's a lot of highlights of that on YouTube. So you may check in to that if you haven't already done so. Were you athletically blessed?
I feel like I was, but at a younger age, you know, I feel like I got hurt. I used to like to play all three sports. I wanted to play baseball, basketball, and football. And, you know, I was really good at baseball, but I feel like I hurt my arm, and I really, at a young age, because all I used to like to do was hear the pop of the mitt and throw fastballs. So my arm got hurt at an early age, so I really didn't get the opportunity to, I guess, explore baseball like I really wanted to. Because at a certain point, I ended up having to give it up because I didn't want to be just a pinch hitter. I wanted to kind of try and do it all like my dad, but I didn't get the opportunity to.
Well, you obviously channeled those feelings to business. What are you doing?
Right now, I'm actually in collections. I'm a collections manager with a company here in the Bay Area. So, you know, it's kind of different. It has nothing to do with sports, but, you know, I really enjoy, you know, what I do at this point, you know, trying to help people, you know, like my dad, you know, that's one of the things he loved, you know, if you ever have the opportunity to meet my dad. My dad was kind of like shy until you got to know him, and then once he softened up, you know, it was all good. Everything was gravy with him at that point, you know, because he's well loved, and I didn't find that out. You know, I always thought that there was something wrong because I thought that he has a really good chance of getting to the Hall of Fame until I went back to Reds country, where I hadn't been back since I was a child. And the Cincinnati Reds, the organization and the fans out there really, 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 really like my dad. Even, you know, here in the Bay Area, you know, a lot of the people I felt like had kind of forgotten about my dad. But if you go to the Oakland Coliseum and see his plaques
and up there because he was inducted into the Bay Area Hall of Fame right after he passed away. And it's interesting to see how many people really remember my father. It's, you have to be a real I'd say a baseball fan to remember my father's baseball career.
I think we're joined by Wayne Unger. Wayne Unger, I'd like you to meet Vada Pinson Jr.
Hey, Vada, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
I'm stuffed. I was delayed because I made my monthly batch of meatballs and sauce. So
wow, you want to share some of that?
Sure, man. Are you anywhere near Orlando, Florida?
Oh wow, no, I'm not. I'm sorry, I'm not. No.
He's in the Bay Area, but if you lived in Orlando, Vada, you'd go by and get some great meatballs because there's a man who can cook.
Yeah, he sounds like it because he sounds full.
Vada, Wayne is going to ask you a few questions just to satisfy his curiosity of.
Well, tell me, like, without having to redo everything, just tell me briefly, what did you guys cover so far?
Well, we briefly went over my father's career, and I try to, when I just go over his days with the Reds, and briefly to sum up, with people actually meeting him in a brief summary of his career.
Okay, I was just curious. So yeah, I'm actually, well, so is Ralph. I'm actually old enough to, I think I first started collecting baseball cards in '62. So I actually, had the card off of his '61 season. Mm-hmm. And, of course, I was and still am a Yankee fan, and the Yankees took the Reds out in 4 games in '61, which eased a little bit of the pain from the year before. I don't know, the year before that was Bill Mazeroski's walk-off, and the Yankees lost in 7 games. But I always when I was a kid, I used to always see him on the Met game, when the Reds played the Mets. Back then, we were lucky. We had the Yankees and the Mets, so we got to see American League and National League. But a lot of people would just get to see the league that their home team played in. And I'm not one to blow smoke up someone's butt, but more times than not, your father always stood out, in a game. For one, whether it be hitting or whether it be defense in the field. So
yeah, Wayne, I wanted to say one thing of what Vada and I talked about. We talked about McClymonds High School in Oakland, where Vada went to school. His outfield mates were Frank Robinson and Kurt Flood. Is that a high school outfield,
yes,
or what?
That is. Actually, I read about that a couple of weeks ago. I did a bit of research. I don't know if we still are. I remember you used to be a little bit more active on Facebook, Vada, and and always advocating for your father's admission to the Hall of Fame. So I remember even then looking, and then in the past 2 weeks, I went back into it, and a lot of strong cases for him. Mm-hmm. How do you feel today about your father's possibility and his case for the Hall of Fame?
Well, I'm optimistic, but I guess as I go on, because if you go on Facebook, I created a page for my father. And then I actually had a gentleman inbox me just a couple of days ago, and it was pretty interesting about the discussion that we had. And it came about when Frank Robinson got traded to Baltimore, and he asked me a question. And this is the first time I'd ever been asked this question by anybody. And the question was, he asked me, so how did you feel about when Frank Robinson was traded? And what was the reason behind Frank Robinson being traded? And I told him I really couldn't put anything on it. I really didn't know, but I did know that what he told me was that he thought that, that my father and Frank Robinson had, back in those time frames, really were trying to push the civil rights movement. And they're saying that my father and Frank Robinson had become trouble in regards to the team, so they decided to trade Frank. And I was kind of taken back by that. I was like, well, wait a minute, because if you know my father, like I know him, and I remember my father being really just, really, very soft-spoken. But, I know that once you got to really know my father become very playful and, really down to earth. And a lot of people have told me that, hey, a lot of the fans, one day he will get in. But, I think that, he has a good opportunity, but still, when I think about the 2,757 hits and, I don't, a lot of people ask me, why did your father not keep playing? Well, because he was still in great shape and he still could play, and I know his last team was with the Milwaukee Brewers. And I felt like he had another opportunity, just basically going and coach once they cut him, because they cut him right before the season started. So I'm thinking that was the next best thing to stay in the baseball, because my father loved the game, and he, I felt like he would have been a great teacher or possibly even a great manager in the very near future, if he hadn't passed away back in 1995. But, because a lot of people, think that the 2,757 is not enough. But as you go on, and I keep reviewing the tapes, and I feel like the time frame that if my father had played with a different team, even though the Cincinnati Reds were the first Major League Baseball team, I feel like if he played with the Yankees or another high-profile team, the stats that he has now would get him in just off of his abilities. But at this point, I still have hope. But yeah. It's interesting how you look at it.
It's interesting though that gentleman, brought up that issue, because your father and Frank Robinson were very popular, and I read that a lot of players on Cincinnati did not like Pete Rose when he came up. And it was actually your father and Frank Robinson who took Pete Rose under their wing and showed him, well, this is how you go about being a ball player, I guess like, the clubhouse, out on the road, the hotel, everything else. And Cincinnati is, it's Ohio, but it's right next to Kentucky. So Cincinnati is not the most racially open-minded city that one can play in, and I'm putting that very mildly.
You're understating that a lot, and what goes with that is their minor league system that Frank and Vada came up through were in the heart of Dixie, the worst places to play. And Frank got his chip on his shoulder, if you will, coming up, playing in front of these crackers in the worst environment. And all post-Jackie, Jackie Robinson had it relatively easy in the minors. He was in Montreal which was a very socially progressive city. And he missed out on things that, not that it wasn't tough, believe me, for Jackie Robinson, but the second crop of guys to come up really suffered more on certain levels. And I don't know if your dad ever talked about his minor league experiences coming up.
Well, if you remember, my dad played the majority of my dad's minor league play was actually played in California because in Visalia, they have a family called the Taylors that actually took my father in. And my father, even as a child, took us down there to visit them, like on the holidays one time, and they really loved my father. I feel like my father really didn't have to deal with a lot of racism, or he was, I guess, very, very strong-willed towards it, but he never let it really show. And only time I think my father let it show was when he actually had got into a big argument with one of the writers called Earl Lawson. I don't know if you know the story in regards with Earl Lawson. That's one of the things that I'm thinking might be one of the things that might be keeping my father out of the Hall of Fame when he got into it with one of the sports writers. But
would you elaborate on that story?
Yeah, well, and this is one of the things I think that when the African American players came up, they played the game the way that it's totally different than the way the game is played now. A lot, my father played the way that the coaches wanted him to play, and I feel like Earl Lawson thought that my father should have been bunting more, should have been doing a lot more different things. And I think that he, from what I was told, he actually got in my father's face and started, ripping my father in the locker room. And then my father I took a swing at him. And it actually went to court, and the cases were dropped. But really, after that point, if you look at all of Earl Lawson's things, he used to have a really high praise for my father, and I feel like he was doing his job. But me knowing my father, I feel like he's kind of like myself, where I try and do everything to the best of my ability, but then you keep and if you know Earl Lawson, he's actually gotten into it with a lot more Major League Baseball players. My father's not the only one. There are a lot more that he's actually gotten into it with. But I feel like that might be one of the things that might have held my father back, because I feel like my father felt really, really bad about that situation. And I feel like he could have handled it a little bit better and just played the game the way that he's always been playing it, and it's unfortunate that, that the sports writers have a big say in who actually gets into the Hall of Fame. Because, my father, I feel like he, a lot of people have forgotten him, but then again, I would say that he, that one incident. And, I've read it a couple of times. I've even talked to my mother in regards to it. And she said that, my dad was really, really upset about the situation, and he wished he could take it back. But, once that's actually happened, you can't take it back, and just move forward. And I feel like my father still played the game, and he was respected by a lot of the players, like Al Oliver. He's on my Facebook page, and Leo Cardenas, his father, is still alive. He still speaks in high regards. And if you ever hear people talk about my dad, you hear them say that he's a gentleman and he played the game the way it should be played.
So no higher compliment than that.
I just looked it up. So this happened in 1962. Did him and Earl smooth things over after the incident? I mean, it seems as though they went to court as well. But but so after it was all said and done, did he and Lawson ever, put it aside, put it behind them?
I think they probably placed it behind them, but when you go back and you look at the votes that my father's actually got into, and if you go look at my Facebook page and you see all the stats that my father led back in the 60s, I don't, the highest number of votes that my father actually got was the year that he passed away. Then after that, everything, as years go on, it would just decline until he was actually removed off the ballot. But I never, just speak with my mom, because my mom is a great voice for baseball. Because if you hear the stories that my mother tells about, being in Ohio, and she has a lot of information, and she would tell me, she said, hey, your father did this, your father did this, and I don't know. That's something I don't know, because Earl Lawson's passed away and my father's passed away. So hopefully they're both sitting up in heaven and they're able to sit down and talk about baseball the way it was meant to be, and hopefully they got over it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's, like your father, you never heard much about him, and part of that could be, again, you say he had that quiet demeanor, and also some players just happen, particularly you'll see it more with outfielders, they just happen to glide, so to speak. I'll give you a perfect example of guys that never seem to be hustling or running hard, but a guy who's considered among the greatest defensive center fielders of all time is Andrew Jones.
Yeah,
I never saw him huffing and puffing toward a ball. He just timed it right. He was quick off. As soon as the ball was off the bat, he reacted to it properly. And the other thing that's always overlooked is, running the correct route. So, I mean, I always tell people, all right, now this may be sacrilege for some people, but I think defensively, Mike Trout is a little bit overrated. He outruns a lot of his mistakes. And there's, a lot of outfielders like that. They got great speed, but you know what? It's, thank God they do, because otherwise they would really be exposed. So,
hey, from Vada's day, there was Willie Davis, and Willie was very fast too, but he took weird routes to the ball and outran a lot of mistakes.
Yes, I learned a word from sports writer Peter Gammons years ago, and he used it to describe negative routes for outfielders, and he would call them vertiginous. So basically, it's like taking the scenic route. So yes.
All right. Hey, Vada, one more question, unless Wayne has more. But I want to ask you, first of all, do you have kids?
No, I don't have any children. No, I don't.
If you had children, what would be the one thing that you'd pass on from your dad to you, to you to your kids?
One of the things, I guess, to try and do everything the right way, and I feel like, take responsibility for your actions and try and do everything the right way, and don't try not to do any shortcuts. Don't do any shortcuts. Be a hard worker, and people will respect you better or more. And because I feel like because when I think about, when I have a picture of my father, and it's on my desk. It used to sit on my desk at work, but it's a picture of my father drinking out of one of the colored only water fountains. And, one of the things for me to think about, what I think about is when I'm at work, I was like, wow. Or every time I look at him and I start having a bad day, I look at that picture and I say, my day couldn't be bad. I'm lucky to be where I'm sitting now, and when I see that, because, to your kids, you want to try and have them be able to do everything. Because like baseball for me, I remember
was like, I found out how baseball really was and how ruthless can be, where I thought I really wanted, that was my dream, was to be in Major League Baseball. And then and my next thing was like, well, what am I going to do if I don't make it into Major League Baseball? And and then I remember, always wanting to, if I did make it into baseball, I said, you always have to have a second plan. My dad said, have a second plan. I remember him saying that to me one time. And I took that, because it didn't happen for me. It doesn't happen for everybody. Some people stick with that one dream, and if it doesn't happen, it just falls. So I just, you have to go with your dreams and do it the best you can, Yeah.
Hey, Vada, how people get surprised. You had something on your Facebook that was so cool. It said, you don't have to like me, but I want you to respect me.
Well, you know who that came from, though. You know whose quote that's from, though, right?
Came from what? I'm sorry.
That's actually a quote. That's actually a quote from Jackie Robinson. I couldn't get I couldn't put him down because I have that on my Facebook page, and and it's just because it's an interesting quote, and that's by Jackie Robinson. And I didn't get the opportunity because it doesn't give you enough space.
Put it in quotes and give him credit, because I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. It doesn't matter if they like you, but as long as they respect you. And I'll tell you something else, Vada. As likable as you are, that never happened.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yeah, that's right. Well, a lot of people, because I always, I think that, just with my father, I remember I used to watch him as a little child, as a child. And one of the things I used to watch is like, how people love him. And I was like, treat people the way you want to be treated. You know what I mean? And I feel like he did that with a lot of the fans and for people that have met him. So, it's just, it's great because, the only thing, that I think that my father might have, if he regretted anything, I think that, well, for me, and that's just me personally, I wish he had stayed in and tried to get those last couple of hits, because I think that if he got those last couple of hits, and he would be in the Hall of Fame today.
No question, because that's the number that was such a milestone number to hit at that time. Hey, Vada, when would you, I'm not leaving you out, anything you want to...
Okay, yeah, so, well, you know what, Vada, I just went on your page. So let me ask you, I have a question for you. How many meatballs would it take to get that Vada Pinson bobblehead?
Well, you know what? Hey, do this for me. Just inbox me, and just inbox me. And hey, you might find a surprise. You might get a surprise.
All right. Well, yeah, all right. So, but so tell me something. So, you did play ball. Did you feel a lot of pressure being Vada Pinson's son?
Yes. Wow. Yes. Yes, it was really. But one of the things about it is that you remember Jesse Gonder, right?
Yes.
Because our families were really, really close, and Jesse actually came to my first tryout when I started trying to play baseball in high school, and I remember the day that I went up there, and it was I remember I got so nervous because I was trying out for Skyline High School's baseball team, and I showed up, and everybody, and I heard people whisper, "That's Vada Pinson's son. That's Vada Pinson's son." It's incredible. The pressure is incredible, and because I knew that once I got there, and I remember Jesse actually said, just try and calm down, and wherever I went, it's like I went to Catholic school for I think for a number of years. Every team I went to, everybody always wanted me to try and play on the team because I was really good as a kid when I started first playing, because I remember in my Catholic school league, the thing that I think that really hurt me was that I was the only one that could reach home plate.
So I had to pitch a lot of games, as a child. So I was like, and throw with a little bit of accuracy. So, it was really hard. And I remember in high school, I didn't really practice like I thought I should have, because my favorite game was actually basketball. And, and I didn't grow enough. I was quick and short, but because I was like 5'9", and, I wanted to play basketball. That was going to be my thing. But then I would always play baseball when it would come up, and they always say, hey, you're good at baseball. But I said, I like basketball better. And, and people just, man, it's hard, because Leo Cardenas, if he tried, we were both trying to play, I think, at around the very same time, his son. And then, and then I looked and I remember Pete Rose's son was trying to play also. And, it's a tough deal, because everybody expecting something that, you have to be able to, realize that everybody's not the same. My father had some quick wheels and he could hit. And I remember one time he would always ask me, how are you practicing, hitting and your swing and a lot of different things. And I would always say, well, no, I'm trying to play basketball. And it's different, it's like, because everybody expects, I guess a certain level, even if you're related to somebody and that's actually famous. So, I tried, and, I think that like today, so like if we went out, I feel like I could always be that guy. Say, like, if you went to a picnic, and I would probably be the guy that would stand out, because I'd be trying to one to hit it over the fence or and trying to run the fastest, because I still trying to keep myself in shape. But when I throw a baseball with my left arm, I can always feel that pain that I felt as a kid, and it really hurts, So it's interesting that people ask that, because And I remember how bad I wanted to play, but then once I felt the dream pass away, I knew when I had to let it go,
Right. Okay. So I have another question. Who in the Hall of Fame, what player that's already in the Hall of Fame would you say has stats that resemble your father's?
And wow, that's a good question. And one of the things I thought that, because, and this not to, downsize anybody, I thought when Harold Baines got in, I remember I was like, I went and I looked at my dad's stats. And then when I put Harold, Mr. Baines' stats, and I thought that I said, okay. I said, but then again, I said, well, hey, my dad has a good chance. But then again, if you look, it's just, I just felt like Harold was a great player, because every time they have this new, page, it's called 20th Century Baseball, where it shows stats of they give a lot of great stats on who were the tops of the 60s, and they come up with a lot of different stats that, it would take years and years to get. And I feel like they're really pumping my father's information out there, and I felt like my dad and Harold's information is close, really close.
Yeah, I think they were different kind of players, though.
Yes. Yeah.
Harold. First of all, Harold did not play defense or had anywhere near the speed of your father.
Exactly. Exactly.
And and he also lasted a long time. Mm-hmm. So I was looking, and I actually myself, it was tough to find someone who I felt was close. I looked at Willie Davis, but I think your father, overall career-wise, had a better career than Willie Davis. They were close. Hey, but
how about this? What if Vada Pinson got into the Dad's Hall of Fame?
Well, he's already there. He's already there.
Would that be enough?
There with me.
All right. Hey, thank you guys. It's
so
terrific.
wait. I wanted to say one. I'll be real quick. So Vada, keep an eye out on this over the next few years. Okay, a player who I found to be like almost like a mirror type player of your father. If he gets into the Hall of Fame, you really need to make some noise. Look at Johnny Damon. Johnny Damon was the one. You know, I couldn't find anybody in the Hall of Fame. I mean, I'm sure there probably is. I just didn't look super duper hard. But Johnny Damon was a guy that came to mind because I remembered he retired also with about 2,700 and change in hits. And I looked at their numbers, and I was like, man, mirror images. So just something to keep an eye on. And I sent you a request on Facebook to be a friend, and we'll stay in touch, man. And you know, one day, hey, if you find yourself in Florida, man, you know, meatballs.
I'll get some meatballs.
Meatballs.
And if you find yourself in Alameda, we got another kind of treat, a 420 treat. So that may come in handy someday, my friend. Thank you guys both. Terrific podcast. Wayne, I appreciate it. And Vada, it took a long time, but we finally got you on the air.
Yeah, we sure did. I appreciate you both.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Vada. You have a great night.
Yeah, I had a good time. And that's if I come hang up from a podcast and I say it was fun, it's got to be a good podcast if it was fun. So thanks again.
Thanks again. Have a great evening, both of you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
All right,
good night, gentlemen. Bye-bye.
Adios, everybody.
The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.